One of the palace maidens who overheard the king's revelation spread the news to the others, and they all laughed at the foolish prince. No wonder he behaves so strangely. He doesn't act like a priest and treats everyone as if they don't matter. One maiden remarked, "Indeed, he's gotten what he deserved. He's truly foolish." Another added, and they all joined in mocking him. Gradually, the news spread across the village like wildfire. The villagers laughed at him and used his story to justify his foolishness. Once upon a time in Ayedari village, situated in the southwestern parts of Nigeria, there lived a prince named Ade. He had a robust physique and appalling attitudes. Ade was the only child of King Adegoke and Queen Abeni. While the king and queen were revered for their humility and dedication to their subjects, Ade's behavior threatened to tarnish the family's reputation. King Adegoke had ruled over Ayedari village for 22 years with peace and prosperity. His fair and just rule had endeared him to all. However, his son Ade displayed a stark contrast in character, exhibiting arrogance and folly. Ade desired unwavering respect and obedience from the villagers, behaving as if he was already a king, despite being merely a prince. He demanded that everyone, both young and old, bow and greet him, addressing him as Obalola. He expected people to practically worship him, even to the point of crawling whenever he passed by. When he's passing by the streets, villagers would fall on their knees and hail him, Karaoleo or Balola, like one hailing a king. Those who disobeyed faced several punishments from his guards. The prince was despised for his arrogance and disregard for elders. The villagers, perplexed by his behavior, speculated about the roots of his arrogance. Some questioned his upbringing, suggesting that being the only child and heir to the throne had led to his inflated ego. Despite his father's continued reign, Ade seemed eager to ascend the throne, eager for the day when he would rule Ayedari village so he could exercise more power and authority. Villagers avoided him at all costs, running away or taking alternative routes when they saw him coming. Despite his parents' admonitions to respect everyone, Ade's behavior only worsened. He even mistreated the palace maids, showing no regard for their well-being. One day, while strolling with his guards, the prince encountered a deaf and dumb orphan who didn't bow to him. Angry prince immediately ordered his guards to punish her. They left her unconscious on the streets, prompting villagers who were peeping through their windows to rescue her when they left. The girl was bedridden and recovered 2 weeks later after so much help and care from the herbalist and support from the villagers. But the incident further tarnished Ade's reputation, causing the villager to despise him more. The king and queen heard a lot of gossips about Ade's behavior and tried to counsel him, but he was obstinate. "My son, life is unpredictable. Treat everyone with respect, regardless of their status," the king advised. But the prince paid no heed. His arrogance only grew and his treatment of others worsened. He continued to live a careless and arrogant life, causing his parents and the villagers great pain and worries. Despite not being loved by the villagers, the prince longed for love and marriage. However, his reputation preceded him, and no woman in the village was willing to marry him, nor were any parents willing to give their daughters to him. Frustrated at the rejection, Ade considered using his father's authority to force a maiden to marry him. He approached his father, King Adegoke, demanding that he declare any maiden he chose to be his wife. However, the king, despite his authority, refused to grant Ade's request. "Son, though I have the authority to command and make things happen in this village, I will not force anyone to marry you. When you find a maiden who is truly interested in you, bring her here and then I will bless your union," the king firmly stated. Ade, who had thought his father would grant his wishes, was left disappointed by his response. Though he pressured the king, however, the king stood firm in his decision, believing that marriage should be based on mutual affection and not coercion. The villagers, in their gossip, labeled the prince with all kind names, referring to his large size by calling him Orobo. They accused him of being a glutton, suggesting that his weight was due to excessive eating. Rumors circulated that he consumed all the food in the palace by himself, leading to his obesity. Some even went as far as to claim that his foolishness was as a result of his brain being controlled by the excess food he consumed. One day, while walking in the village, the prince overheard some ladies gossiping about him. They called him big for nothing, empty-headed, a spoiled brat, foolish prince, and useless. Enraged by their words, he ordered his guards to deal with them. The guards, as heartless as the prince, carried out his order ruthlessly, almost taking the girls' lives. The girls fell sick and were bedridden for days, requiring treatment with several herbs to recover. The parents of the girls, upon learning of the incident, were furious. They stormed to the palace to report the prince's actions to the king. Hearing of his son's atrocities, the king became angry. He summoned the prince to his chamber to confirm the allegations laid against him. "Ade, is it true you asked your guards to beat up some girls?" the king asked, his tone laced with anger. "Yes," the prince stuttered. "How could you? Don't you have common sense and regard for this throne?" said the king, visibly disappointed. They were insulting me, calling me useless, foolish, and other bad names." Ade defended himself. "Shut up," the king interrupted. "You're such a big disappointment. You're a pain in my heart. And you call yourself Obalola and heir to this throne? Haven't you behaved so foolishly? Is this how we have raised you?" The king felt extremely displeased with his son's behavior. He warned him and commanded that such actions should never be repeated. The queen, on hearing of his atrocities, also called him aside and scolded him. "Ade, you've acted so foolishly. No heir to the throne should behave in such a manner. Kingdoms are not ruled by wickedness, but by love and respect. Ruling people requires that you have regard for them, because without them, you wouldn't have anyone to rule. Treat people like they do matter, because truly, they matter. Treat people just the way you want to be treated. What goes around comes around. No wise heir to the throne behaves as foolishly as this," she said, her voice firm with anger. That day, the king and queen spoke great and heart-touching words of wisdom to Ade, trying to explain how a prince and heir to the throne should behave. However, Ade was strong-headed, ignoring everything they said. He would apologize and promise to change, but his attitude grew worse. He mistreated people and disregarded the elders while boasting that he was the future king. Daily, at least 1 or 2 persons would visit the palace to complain about the prince's wickedness and attitudes towards them. The incessant reports of his behavior by the villagers worried his parents, most especially the king. One day, after so much thoughts and considerations, the king decided to send the prince to Agbaka village, a neighboring village where the king had spent his youthful years before he was crowned the king of Ayedari village. The king had spent some years at Agbaka village with its ruler, whom he knew to be a strict disciplinarian. He felt that sending Ade to him would help transform his attitudes for the better. The next day, Prince Ade was sent to Agbaka village. Upon arriving, he realized the strictness in the palace, so he behaved himself. Though he didn't like the idea, he had no choice. He struggled to behave humbly because he had heard of the king's strictness and knew the king could lock him up in the palace prison if necessary. A month after Ade had left the village, villagers felt a sense of peace. They hadn't seen the prince for so long and wondered where he was. Some believed he was locked up in the palace to tame him, while others thought he might have traveled out of the village. Regardless, they were extremely happy for his absence and wished he never returned, so they could continue to enjoy the peaceful atmosphere. In the palace, Queen Abeni fell terribly ill. The king initially thought she was missing her sword, but when her sickness persisted, they called on the herbalist to examine her. After thorough checks, the herbalist confirmed that the queen was pregnant. The news of her pregnancy filled the king and queen's hearts with great joy. They had prayed and wished for a child for over 2 decades, and finally their prayers were answered. The king ordered that the queen be properly cared for and given utmost attention. The herbalist took care of her, providing all the necessary herbs to help her and her baby stay healthy, while the queen continually prayed to have a baby boy. Prince Ade, on the other hand, was struggling to cope in Agbaka village. He lived in the palace like a commoner, with no guards following him around the village. The king of Agbaka disciplined him with so much hard work, and Ade, though tired, dared not complain for fear of being locked up in prison. He lived quietly and stayed humble, praying that his father would send for him to return to his village. Ayedari village enjoyed peace in the prince's absence, while the king and queen also enjoyed greatly the peace and serenity. 7 months later, the queen gave birth to twin boys. The king and queen were overjoyed, especially because they were boys. Their joy knew no bounds. When the foolish prince heard about the twins, he was happy but also had mixed feelings. He knew that attention would now be taken away from him and shifted on the twins. Nevertheless, he still celebrated the arrival of his brothers. On the 7th day, the naming ceremony of the twins took place, and the king invited all neighboring kings to celebrate with him. This time, the prince was allowed to return to the village. The overjoyed king celebrated the naming ceremony like a big wedding party. There was an abundance of food and drinks, and the villagers ate and drank to their heart's content. Many even packed food home, enough to last them for almost a week. It was indeed a huge celebration. After the ceremony, the king allowed the foolish prince to stay back in the village, thinking he had turned a new leaf. Ade was excited, but it didn't take long for him to start exhibiting his bad attitude again, tormenting the villagers. One day, while strolling around the streets, one of the villagers, Arole, walked past the prince and refused to worship or call him Obalola like some would. Enraged, The prince ordered his guards to deal with him. However, Arole stood his ground and refused to be handled like others. Instead, he boldly insulted the prince, calling him a bastard. See you, bastard. You are obviously a bastard because you don't behave like your so-called parents. If you dare touch me, I will tell you the story of your life, Arole declared boldly. The prince was shocked at Arole's boldness and especially at his words. He felt deeply embarrassed and returned to the palace in shame. Arole was known in the village as a quiet and well-respected man who minded his own business. Villagers were surprised by his outburst and began to wonder where he had obtained such information. They started to question the prince's heritage, suggesting that since he had behaved contrary to his parents, there might be some truth to Arole's claim. In Ayedari village, the rumors about the prince's lineage spread like wildfire, causing him great distress. He avoided going into the village, fearing the gossip and mockery that awaited him. One day, while he was walking around the outskirts of the village, he overheard some villagers talking about him. "He's not a prince, he's a bastard. No wonder he behaves so foolish," one villager remarked loudly. The words cut deep into Ade's heart. Being called a bastard was a great insult, especially for someone who had believed himself to be the heir to the throne. Feeling ashamed and defeated, Ade quietly walked away. However, the stares and whispers of the villagers followed him, adding to his humiliation. Unable to bear the shame any longer, the prince decided to confront his parents to find out the truth behind the rumors. He needed to know if he was truly a prince or just a bastard as the villagers claimed. That evening, his heart was heavy as he approached the king's chamber. Upon entering, he found both his parents there. With a trembling voice, he addressed the king. "Long live my king," Ade began, his eyes filled with tears. "Aren't you my father?" The king and queen were taken aback by his question. The queen, with a firm voice, responded, "Why would you ask such a foolish question?" Ade, unable to contain his emotions, poured out his heart. "People say I'm a bastard. I can't even walk on the street any longer. They all gossip about me and mock me, calling me a foolish bastard. I demand to know, aren't you my father?" he cried. His parents were deeply saddened by his words. The king, seeing Ade's desperate need for the truth, decided it was time to reveal a long-kept secret. He motioned for Ade to sit down and then began to tell him a story. "Well, Ade, you are now 22 years old and old enough to know your true identity. You see, many years ago, shortly after your mother and I got married in Agbaka village, I grew up with the Agbaka king. After our wedding, we moved out of the palace to start a new life together. One evening, while we were having fun in a playground in the bush, we heard the cry of a baby. At first, I thought it was just some bush babies or animals, but your mother insisted it was a human baby. We followed the sound and then we found a baby under a big tree. We were hesitant to pick up the baby, wondering who would abandon a child in the bush. Despite our initial fear, we decided to take the baby home. When we got home, we were surprised by a knock on our door. At first, we were scared. We thought maybe someone trailed us back home because of the baby. But when I opened the door, to my shock, it was the king's messengers and guards from Ayedari village. They had come to inform me that the incumbent king had passed away and the gods had chosen me to be the next king. According to tradition, I had to leave immediately to assume my new role. So we packed our belongings and the baby and headed to Ayedari village. The king continued. "I was crowned the king of Ayedari 7 days after the former king's demise. Since we arrived with a baby and planned to raise the child as our own, Everyone assumed the baby was ours. We never felt the need to tell anyone the truth until now. Ade, you are that abandoned baby we found in the bush that night. We took you as our own before the gods blessed us with twins. If you hadn't misbehaved and acted foolishly in the village, no one would have called you a bastard. The king's voice was filled with compassion as he revealed the truth to his son. The foolish prince, upon hearing his story, fell into deep embarrassment and sorrow. He dropped to his knees and apologized for all his past bad behavior. He felt deeply remorseful, realizing he was not a true prince and no longer the heir to the throne, but the twins were. Overwhelmed with shame, he locked himself in his room and wept bitterly. One of the palace maidens overheard the king's revelation, spread the news to the others, and they all laughed at the foolish prince. No wonder he behaves so strangely. He doesn't act like a priest and treat everyone as if they don't matter, one maiden remarked. Indeed, he's gotten what he deserved. He's truly foolish, another added, and they all joined in mocking him. Gradually, the news spread across the village like wildfire. The villagers laughed at him and used his story to justify his foolishness. Those who harbored anger towards him found new ammunition to mock him and belittle his ego. Some even went as far as saying bush babies will definitely behave bushy. Ade, aware of the spreading news, refused to leave his quarters, unable to bear the mockery and ridicule from the villagers. He wept bitterly, regretting his past behavior. He stayed indoors, reflecting on his actions, determined to change for the better. Do you think the foolish prince truly got what he deserved? Comment yes or no below. And if you think this story deserves continuation, kindly reply "continue the story" in the comment section. I hope you enjoyed and learned something valuable. Kindly like this video and subscribe for more interesting stories than these. Thanks for watching. See you in our next video. Bye.